俺はガンダムで行く。
Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm SOJOURN and today we're finally covering mechs and mecha, something we've not touched on before because they're a bit of a blind spot for me. I've always been more into tanks than mechs and I can't really say what the root cause of that is, especially when I used to love the Zords in Power Rangers as a kid. Recently I've begun to rectify that blind spot by engaging with more mech media like Gundam, which I've had a passing interest in for a while due to its use of many realistic space technology things. The problem is that it's such a vast franchise I had no idea where to start, but thanks to the wonders of social media I got a recommendation for War in the Pocket, which I greatly enjoyed. One of the things it did a fairly good job at was showing the huge scale of the mobile suits in the Gundam universe, and even a little bit of the variation in size even just within the setting. And that variation is one of those peculiar things about mechs in general, since they can go from blurring with power armor right up to being bigger than galaxies. And it's all still mechs. One of the observations I've made about mecha media is that this scaling up of the human form has meant that all sorts of other things have been scaled up to match, from equipment to the environment itself. To me, this can feel a bit silly at times, like Patlabor's giant revolvers, but to be fair, mecha aren't meant to be realistic. And like, who doesn't love a really big robot suit with a giant Spaz 12? This does lead to a problem I have with mecha in general, which is that they often just end up as stand-ins for people. I get that this is sort of the point, but it just seems unimaginative and tiresome to me when you have a huge machine that's just running around and doing exactly the same things as a person. Why even bother with the size if you're not going to make it feel huge? That's one of the things that Pacific Rim did a really excellent job of, with the Jaegers really feeling just as big as they looked thanks to the way they moved. Gundam contrasts that, since I had no idea mobile suits were that big until I saw War in the Pocket, which put them up against other objects. The lack of scale and being a stand-in for a person are big reasons I've never really been into mechs all that much. It just seems kind of pointless to me if you have something that moves like a person, uses person objects, and exists in a space that makes them look person-sized. They may as well just be a person. Broadly, this isn't really a problem, as it's meant to be the point of them as I understand it, since mecha are sort of meant to be a superhero equivalent. I don't know, I guess I just want them to be doing more than just being mechanical stand-ins. That's why I really liked the Hygog and other amphibious mobile suits in the opening of War in the Pocket. The design considerations made to make them feel like they can withstand great pressures, and the vague streamlining of their forms is really cool. But most of all, I loved the Hygog's strange, bendy, extendable arms and the funky missile pods that Cyclops team used. They build on the human form while doing things that a human can't, like the extendable stabby arm on Patlabor's Type 0. I will say that one huge plus to mecha being person-like is their choreography. It's just so much easier to read and understand the flow of action and the drama in it when it's a humanoid taking something on. It's easy to be excited by it, and it has the side effect of having mechanical gore to really sell hits and damage. Which brings us to another neat thing about mechs, which is the individual body parts they are made of. A tank is limited because you have the turret, hull and mobility, but with a mech you get all the limbs, plus a torso, head and extras like a backpack, plus whatever equipment it's carrying with the hands, if applicable. These can be damaged or destroyed in a piecemeal fashion that makes the mech feel heroic, something that's more difficult to do with a more normal vehicle. Plus, all these parts give tons of options for mixing and matching and customization, something that mecha games make especially good use of, to the point where it's practically a core feature of any game with mechs in. Something else I've noticed is that there's a general trend to only have the one operator in a mech, and they're typically referred to as a pilot. Which makes sense, it fits the idea of the mech being an extension of a person, letting them get into dramatic duels and stuff. Lots of similarities with fighter plane stories in that regard, reinforced further by the little bits of customization the pilots occasionally do. This isn't always the case, of course, but I just haven't seen enough of mech stories where there's multiple crew per vehicle to talk about it. But I have seen a bunch of different control schemes for them, and it seems like a lot of media doesn't go far enough in showing just how a pilot can move a mech around so well. While skilled operators can do some crazy stuff with heavy machinery, controlling a whole body is a lot more complicated than just one simplified limb. add on all the extra stuff Mecha can have, like additional weapons, extra limbs, rocket engines, and different sensor systems, and I just question how much good you can do with a couple of joysticks. Yeah, you can add on a level of abstraction between the controls and the mech through a walk-by-wire system, but I don't think that's going to be enough. I did enjoy that the first Patlabor movie was explicitly about such a computer system too, and then the second one had the extra detail of the glove control system Noah was trialling, because that's the sort of thing you'd really need to work a mech. A full bodysuit that directly uses human movements in the mech is good, but something like the sort of halfway there system that Avatar, The Matrix, and Patlabor have seems like it'd be good enough. Or go with what Armored Core does and have the pilot be plugged right into it like they were just another part of the machine. At least I think that's what happens. I haven't actually played one of those games yet. Mecha don't just run around on the ground though. Some can fly and many others work in space too, which has its own unique set of challenges. But at least something with as much freedom of movement as a human body is fairly good at reorienting themselves in freefall. Just like how cats can spin around to land on their feet in a fall, humans can also just twist their bodies to spin around in 0G. And Gundam knows this and built it right into the setting with the AMBAC system, which is really cool. This next bit isn't strictly a problem with the mecha themselves, but more the idea that they're somehow really well suited to spaceflight for some reason. AMBAC is great and all, but it's not magic, and it's not enough to make up for the weird changes in centre of mass and thrust that occur with limb-mounted thrusters. But that does look cool, and that's the whole point. If you were going for something realistic, then you wouldn't have huge mecha fighting with lightsabers in space. The last thing to touch on is another general observation about the various roles of mechs in any given setting. They mostly seem to be used for combat, with civilian jobs like construction coming in second place. Patlabor's whole deal with needing mechs to police civilian mechs is very interesting too, I like that. The general justification for the varied roles seems to be taking advantage of the versatility of the human form and just scaling that up. But that ignores that the human form is actually not well suited to specialised tasks. A crane is designed for lifting, so it's going to be superior to a multi-role vehicle that does that job. If a setting has magic mech tech, then just apply that to the specialised vehicles as well. Really, this is just another thing you're not meant to think about too much. It happens because it's cool. Though if a setting tries to over-justify why a mech is used in this fashion, then it invites scrutiny. While I have enjoyed trying out new media, I can't say that it's really changed my preferences. Though I have at least learned that there are weird mechs like the Hygog, and I do quite enjoy those. But I do have a much better understanding of why mechs are so popular now that I didn't have before. The superhero vibes, how personal they can get, and the just plain cool stuff that they can do. I can definitely see the appeal, and now I have a much better appreciation for why mechs are such a beloved part of science fiction. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate and spacefighter design reference books. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.